Hashem. Today's daf yomi is Chullin daf Lamed Vav, Chullin 36, and we're going to start on the second line on Lamed Vav Amud Aleph 36a. The Gemara is discussing what makes something capable of becoming tamei, ritually impure. That the only way a food item can become a seed can become tamei is if it's first hochshar l'kabel tamei. It has to be capable, and that is by having one of 7 liquids come upon it. And in order for this to work, one of those 7 liquids, which is yad shechat dam, and one of them includes the water, but wine, but also blood. But you have to want the liquid to come on it. And also, our Gemara has been discussing that not all blood makes something hochshor kabel tuma. Meaning to say, yesterday's daf said that the blood of an animal while it was being killed is different than the blood of an animal that was killed through shchita. It's different than the blood of a wound. It's different than the blood of an animal that just dies on its own. So in today's daf, the Gemara tells us, Tanan debei Rabbi Shmuel, the dam chaolim yishteh. It says the blood of an animal that was killed not through shchita, you can drink, which means to say that blood is like water and it makes something hochshor kabel tumah. And this comes to exclude prat ladam kiluach she'eno machshir, says Rambam. So it's coming to exclude the blood of kiluach, that does not make a seed capable of contracting tumah. What's the dam kiluach? Rashi says, hamakidas habehema betchila hadam shoses, that basically when you kill the animal, the first blood that comes out, shoses betipa achas oshtayim, that comes out with 1 or 2 drops. Afterwards, it's the kiluach, and then, or pours forth, and afterwards it's darker. So, and we learn in Maseches Kritus what is considered the dam heikes shanefesh yotzebo mitipa mashcheres ve'elach. So only once the blood is darker, that's where we're going to say that it's the lifeblood. But earlier it's the dama kiluach. And so this dama kiluach is not going to be considered like blood to make the seeds capable of contracting tumah. Hochshor kabel tumah. So now the Gemara discusses this concept further. Tanu Rabbanan has shochet v'hitis dama hadalas. Let's say somebody slaughters an animal and some blood spurts forth onto the gourd, the splash. Rebbe Omer Hochshar. Rebbe says that blood in the shlita makes the squash capable of contracting tumah. Excuse me. Whereas Rebbe Chia Omer Tolan. Rebbe Chia says that blood presumably does not, because Rebbe Chia's response is that it's Tolan. Tolan means suspend. So Rebbe says the blood of the shlita that falls on the gourd makes the gourd capable of contracting tumah, and Rebbe Chia says we suspend the matter. We'll see what that means. Amar Aboshaya me'achar Rebbe Omar Hochshar. Rebbe says it makes it Hochshar, and Rebbe Chia says it's Tolan. Rebbe Chia says we suspend. Anu al mi nismoch. Who should we rely upon? Bo v'nismoch al divrei Rabbi Shimon. Let's go back to the position of Rabbi Shimon that we learned on Lamed Hey Amud Aleph. On Lamed Daled Amud Aleph, the position of Rabbi Shimon, where Rabbi Shimon said that. Already. Hold on 1 second. Lamed Gimel Amud Aleph, the position of Rabbi Shimon, where Rabbi Shimon's position was that Rabbi Shimon Omer. And this is the way Rav Asi explained Rabbi Shimon in yesterday's daf. Shchita mekasheres v'lodam. That shchita makes the animal capable of contracting. Tumah makes the meat, but not the blood of the shchita. So therefore, since Rabbi Shimon says it's not hochshar, and Rabbi Chia says tolen, then we could assume that blood does not make it hochshar kabel tumah, the blood of the shchita. So Amar Papa Hakol Modim, everybody, both Rabbi and Rabbi Chia, they would agree. Where the blood was on the squash from the beginning of the shechita until the end, everybody would say that under those circumstances, that blood is going to make the squash hochshor kabel tumah. They're only arguing about a situation where the blood was wiped off the squash after the first siman was shechted, but before the second siman was shechted. Rabbi Savar, Rabbi's position is Yeshna Shlita Mitchil Vatsof. Since it went on in the beginning, that's part of the Shlita. Therefore, it's Hochshar Kabel Dam. Whereas Rabbi Chia Savar, the High Dam Shlita, and therefore it's the blood of the Shlita, so it's Hochshar Kabel Tuma. Whereas Rabbi Chia Savar, Eino Shlita Al Basof. He says, no, the only part of the Shlita is at the end. The High Dam Maku, so therefore this blood is the blood of the wound. And so therefore the blood of the wound is not this does not have the same power to make it Hochshar Kabel Tuma. And so what does Rabbi Chia mean when he says Tolen? Meaning Tolen Hadavar Ad Gemara Shlita. We don't look at the blood right away. We look at the blood only once the Shlita is finished. If there is blood on the squash at the end of the Shlita, then it's Hochshar. But if there's no blood there anymore at the end, Lo Machshir. And so then it would not be Hochshar. That's what Tolen means. We wait. Umay Bo V'Nisma Chodever Rabbi Shimon. What does it mean? We wait. We rely upon Rabbi Shimon. So he says Rabbi Shimon. So we say we break it down like this. Rabbi Shimon will machshir. Rabbi Shimon says that blood does not make the squash hochshir. Rabbi Chia machshir ben niskaneach. But Rabbi Chia says it's only machshir once Rabbi Chia says it is machshir. But ben niskaneach mio ashvul adadi. But where the squash was cleaned off, both Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Chia would agree that it's not Hochshar Kabel Tumah. So Marlo Machshir. Rabbi Echad. So therefore, Rabbi is the only one who says it's Machshir, whereas Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Chia, but in case of Niskanech, both say it's not Machshir. And so therefore, Rabbi Chia Echad ve'in v'rav shel Echad b'makom shnayim. And so therefore, we wouldn't rely like Rabbi, but we would rely upon Rabbi Chia and Rabbi Shimon in a case where the squash was cleaned off, where it was Niskanech. So according to this first approach, what does Tolen mean? That Tolen means that we don't look at the matter until the conclusion of the Shlita, and we see if the blood is still there. Rav Ashi says Tolen la'ola mashma, and that the word Tolen means we leave it. We don't decide the matter. We don't decide the matter until Rashi says until Elijah will come. V'odienu. Actually, v'odienu. So therefore, we have to wait till Elijah will tell us the halacha. V'niskaneach. If it would be cleaned off, according to Rav Ashi, let's say it would be cleaned off after the first siman. Rabbi Chia sipuke misapkile. Rabbi Chia is not sure. So if he's not sure if there's shlita from the beginning until the end. And so he's not sure if there's shlita from beginning to end or only in the end. Umay tolen. So what does it mean when he says tolen? Lo ochlin v'lo sarfin. It means we don't eat it and we don't burn it. If it would be actually tamei, we would burn it. If it's not tamei, then if it's truma, we could eat it. What does it mean? So what does it mean? We rely upon the position of Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon lo machshir. Rabbi Shimon says that this blood does not make the squash hochshar. Rabbi Chia sfeika. Rabbi Chia says it's a doubt. Tolinian sreifa miu shavu adadi. But with respect to burning of it, they both agree. Marlo sarfe and Marlo sarfe. Rabbi Shimon says you don't burn it because it's not tamei, and Rabbi Chia says you don't burn it because we're not sure. Rabbi Chad, but Rabbi says to burn him, but there's only one position. We don't follow one vis-a-vis two. And V'achikamer could go in those tolen. So in this circumstance where Rabbi Chia is not sure, Rabbi Shimon is sure that we don't burn it. Therefore, could go in those tolen will suffer. We don't eat it and we don't burn it. So by Rish Lakish, so right now Rish Lakish has the following question. Tzarid shel menachos. What's the tzarid of the menachos? This is a piece of a kernel of flour that was mixed into a utensil for a grain offering, a carbon mincha, but the oil didn't go to it, so it's still dry. So it was, technically speaking, it was never hochshar l'kabel tumah. It didn't have a liquid on it. But still, says Reish Lakish, monim bo rishon v'sheni. We're going to see that even though it didn't have liquid on it, nevertheless, because it's kachim, we say it's capable of becoming tamei because of this concept called chibas hakodesh. The kachim, something that's holy, is so beloved, so that it's like it's a finished product, and it's capable of becoming tamei. So Reish Lakish's chiddush is not only that it's capable of becoming tamei, but it itself can transmit tumah as though liquid had come on it. Modim bo rishon masheni can make something a first degree or even a second degree tumah. He's asking the question actually. Oh, ain't modim rishon masheni, or does he not capable? I mean, say Reish Lakish's question is: do we view it as though it's completely tamei, as though water liquid had come upon it, or do we say no, it itself is tamei, but it can't make anything else tamei? So that's what Reish Lakish asked. Kimahanya chibas hakodesh. This concept called chibas hakodesh, does it work? Vavsule gufe, to make it itself tamei. But to make other items a rishon or a sheni, it doesn't work. Odilma loshna. Or do we say no? It's like any item that becomes tamei. Once it's tamei, it's tamei. So Rebbe Lazar says, let me answer this question. I'm Rabbi Lazar Tashma. Says in the pasuk. The pasuk refers to Mikol Ochel Asher Yeachel Asher Yavol of Mayim Yitma B'Chol Mashke Asher Yishteh B'Kol Kli Yitma. So the pasuk says Mikol Ochel Asher Yeachel. So we see from here that it's a redundant word. So what is that? What do we learn from here? Says Rabbi Lazar. Ochel Abba B'Mayim Hochsher. Now, what's a food item that becomes hochsher kabel tumah and is able to transmit the tumah fully? That's if it has water on it. So if it doesn't have liquid on it, it's not capable of transmitting the tumah. And so therefore, he answers Reish Lakish's question by saying that this menachos would, even though it itself is disqualified, it doesn't transmit the tumah. So the Gemara says, "Atu Reb Shimon Lakish leisle ochel abba b'mayim." You think Reish Lakish doesn't know that pasuk? Of course, Reish Lakish knows that pasuk. Of course, he knows the pasuk that food items become capable of contracting tumah when water comes upon them. But that's not what he was asking. Reish Lakish hachi kami bayilei. This is what his question was. Chibas hakodesh. This concept that something that's beloved by kodesh and it becomes tamei even without liquid that comes on it. Do we say it's exactly like a food item that has liquid on it? I mean, it's exactly like a food item that has liquid on it. Or do we say it's a different one? It's disqualified, but it's not the same as if liquid had come on it. Rabbi Lezer, so that was his question. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Lezer, nami mi turi krai karma. Rabbi Lezer, he was citing this pasuk, he was citing it from the extra word in the verse. Since there's another pasuk, a few psukim later that says that if water will come on the seed, if that's the case, why does it need to have this pasuk, which says from any food item that you eat? So isn't he excluding our case, or on top of Vavam base? Isn't it excluding the case of chibas hakodesh, where a food item became tamei just because it was kachim and not because liquid came upon it? So that is not able to transmit the tumah. So the Gemara says, no, that's not necessarily the case. The reason why we have the two psukim is we were talking about two different types of tumah, that in both cases, they could become huksher l'kabel tumah if there's liquid on it. One is where the food item became tamei, chabet tumas meis, chabet tumas sheretz. One is where the food item touched a dead person, that's called tumas meis. And one is because the food item touched a dead creature, a sheretz. In both cases, the concept of huksher l'kabel tumah applies. We need both teachings. Because if we just said the concept of something that came tummy from touching in that body, we would say hasam hu debai hechsher. There requires hechsher l'kabel tumah. Mishum delam. There requires liquid first. Mishum delav mitame b'kadasha, because it's not so severe. The tumah of a dead body is only acquired if the dead body is the size of an olive. But the sheretz transmits tumah even the size of a lentil. Avol sheretz the mitame kedasha aim below we buy achshar. I think it doesn't require hochshor kabel tumah. Miyashmin on sheretz, and if we had the case of a sheretz, I would say mishum the mitame tumah shiva. I would say that the sheretz maybe it if we just had the case of the sheretz, I would say now the reason it requires hechsher is because the sheretz is more lenient because you're only tame for once you go to the mikvah. Aval mace, the metame tuma shiva, but if you get tummy from a dead body, you're tummy for 7 days. It's much more severe. Maybe it doesn't require hechsher kabel tuma, so therefore we need it by both cases. Tzricha. And now the Gemara challenges Rebbe Lazar. Remember, Reish Lakish said, "Is this item that became hechsher that became tamei through chibas hakodesh, is it able to transmit tuma?" And Rebbe Lazar seems to say it's not. So the Gemara challenges. And most of Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Shimon Omer, hochshur b'shlita. Rabbi Shimon says that an animal that was slaughtered, even without blood, becomes hochshur kabel tuma through the slaughter itself. So we say hochshur b'shlita. Hochshur v'afil. Doesn't that mean v'afil mimnei b'hu rishon v'sheni? Doesn't it mean that it's even capable of making something of rishon or sheni? So now, like Rebbe Lazar, so the Gemara says Rebbe Lazar would say amai, but according to Rebbe Lazar, why is it capable of transmitting tumah? There was no liquid on it. So Abaye says no, leave aside. That's not a proof from Rabbi Shimon. Why? It's just rabbinically that Rabbi Shimon is saying that it's capable of making something else tamei. Just rabbinically. I'm a Rabbi Zera. Another attempt, Tashma, and this comes from the. So Rabbi Zera says the following. Then we learn this machlokas. Habotzer legat. That let's say you're harvesting grapes and you're planning on bringing grapes to the press, and remember it's only a problem if you want the liquid. So now what happens is some of the juice from the grapes oozes out. The Shammai's position is huchshuru, that if their liquid oozes out, those grapes are all becoming tamei, capable of becoming tamei. And Hul Omer lo huchshur. And Hul says it's not huchshur because he doesn't want them to come out yet. Because he only wants them to come out when he's going to press them. They're not yet at the press. V'shasakli Hillel Shammai. And Hillel actually changed his mind, reversed himself, and he holds like Shammai. Amai, but why? But why is Hillel going to agree with Shammai here? Because the owner doesn't want this, and so therefore it's not something he wanted. And if that's the case, why are we saying it makes something hoshel kabel tumah? From the fact that we say that here, we see from here that also by chibas hakodesh we could say it makes something hoshel kabel tumah. So Amay Abaye, no, there too it's just rabbinic. Asul kehachshar mayim midrabanan. It's only rabbinic, not biblical. Amay Rav Yosef. So Rav Yosef says to his student Abaye, Aminu ana hochshru b'shlita. I said the case of our mission that was hochshru b'shlita. Va'ata meritli asul kehachshar mayim, and you said, oh, it's just rabbinic. Va'amrocha Rabbi Zera. Rabbi Zera also gives you a good proof. Va'amrocha asul kehachshar mayim. And you said basically it's only rabbinic. So according to Reish Lakish, also, why don't we just give that same answer that rabbinically they said it transmits tumah? That rabbinically it should transmit tumah. Amrlo atu Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish l'tlos coming by the way. So Abaye responds to his Rabbi Yossi. If you think Reish Lakish's question was about whether or not we say that it's rabbinically capable of transmitting tumah, like the case of litlos, he coming by lisro. If he wants to know if biblically it's tamei, so that we would burn the kachim. That's what is basic. That we would burn the truma if it touched truma. So miklal. So we see from here that was his question. So we see from here that the main concept of the food item itself becoming tamei of chibas hakodesh, that's dioraisa. This teaches us this basic principle as a biblical law. No one. How do we know this idea that chibas hakodesh is biblical? So that's what the Gemara is going to say. Anyway, if you want to say dilsev, because we learn out from the meat of kachim, it says basar asher yigab kol tamei. Any meat that touches anything that's tamei cannot be eaten. Hi basar. Well, if this kachim meat touched tamei, how did it become hochshel kabel tumah in the first place? Hi basar diskasher b'mai. Anyway, this kasher b'dam, if you want to say it became hochshar from the blood, v'amar b'chia bar Abba, amar b'yochanan, minayel dam kachim she'ena machshir. We say explicitly the blood of kachim is not machshir. Shenemar lo tochlu haaretz tishbachenu kamayim. Dam nishbach kamayim machshir she'ena nishbach kamayim ena machshir. Blood that's not spilled like water does not make a food item hochshar kabel tumah. Well, they say, well, maybe the butcher shop in the temple, the butcher area, which is called the basement v'chaya, maybe there was blood there or liquids there that made this item hochshar kabel tumah. That can't work either because Amar Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina, mashki basement v'chaya lo dayan shein dacha. Not only are the liquids in the butcher area of the temple pure themselves, el she'ein machshirin. They don't make any item capable of contracting tumah. And if you want to say that statement of Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina only refers to the blood of the base mitbachaya, that can't be. It says the liquids. So it must be that the food item itself became kosher, became kosher kabel tumah, this carbon, this meat that the Torah refers to, through this concept of chibas hakodesh. And that's how we see that chibas hakodesh is biblical concept. The Gemara says, but that's not a proof. There's another way you could have got liquid on it. But don't look at Rabbi Yehuda Mishmul. Rabbi Yehuda Mishmul could go and shaisel para shal divchei shlamim. Let's say a guy's bringing his carbon shlamim to the temple, and while he's bringing the cow, Avira benachol, he brought it through the river, and then Shota, once he slaughtered it, Vadayim Mashke Tofecho, it still had some water on the outside of it, and it touched the meat. So it's basically from the conclusion of that pasuk. El Miseifa, Vahabasar. It says Vahabasar Asher Yigav Chol Tamei, and then it's Lo Yechal Ba'eshi Saref Vahabasar. That second Vahabasar is extra because the verse already told us. The beginning of the verse already said we're referring to the basar. So that second basar is Larabos Eitzim Lavona. It's to tell us that wood and Lavona, which is a spice, can also become tamei. But how could that be? Eitzim Lavona b'nei achionenu. Eitzim Lavona, they're not. How could they become tamei? Only a food item or a utensil or a person or a dead animal, those can become tamei. But spices and just plain wood, how could they become tamei? So generally speaking, they wouldn't be able to. But this pasuk is teaching us chibas hakodesh mekasher lahu umashvilu ochel. This concept called chibas hakodesh makes it capable of this food items contracting tumah. So now we see from here that this concept of chibas hakodesh makes something capable of contracting tumah. This concept is that because it's kodesh, it's so beloved. So hachinami chibas hakodesh mechshar. That's why we say a food item that is, as what's called chibas hakodesh, is capable of contracting tumah, and that's a biblical idea. And so now that's what Reish Lakish's question is. His question is, okay, this food item that's sacred, it's temple food. So yes, through this concept of chibas hakodesh, it becomes inherently disqualified. It itself is disqualified. Although but it's not like a regular tumah that it can transmit tumah and make something else into a rishon or eventually a sheni, or dilma, or maybe we say lo shna. Maybe we say it's the same thing like regular food items that become tamei, and so that can transmit tumah. And so this was Reish Lakish's question, and the Gemara says, "Teiku, we leave this question unresolved," and so at the end we don't resolve the question. Okay, that's today's daf. Let me just stop the recording. We say